The ice didn't care who they were, not their dreams, not their courage, not their flags. One by one, ships vanished into it. Men froze inside it. Entire expeditions disappeared beneath it. And in 1914, a man willingly sailed straight into that white grave. Not to survive, not to explore, but to do what nobody had ever done before: cross Antarctica. Their ship became a prison, then a coffin. For nearly 2 years, these men drifted through one of the deadliest places on Earth. No rescue, no communication, no hope, and yet somehow not a single man died, because their leader refused to surrender. This is the story of Ernest Shackleton. Long before Antarctica knew his name, Ernest Shackleton was just a restless boy in Ireland. But even as a child, he seemed allergic to ordinary life. School walls felt too small. Routine felt like a cage. While others imagined comfort, he imagined distance. Storms, unknown maps, white horizons. At 16, he left school and went to sea. Not because it was safe, but because it wasn't. The ocean hardened him quickly. Freezing winds, endless labor, weeks without comfort. But Shackleton discovered something about himself out there. The harder life became, the calmer he grew. Years later, he joined expeditions heading toward the most dangerous place on Earth, Antarctica. Back then, Antarctica wasn't just remote. It was almost mythical. A frozen wilderness capable of swallowing entire crews without a trace. And yet, the more brutal it appeared, the more Shackleton wanted it. He wasn't chasing money or fame. He was chasing meaning, because some people only feel alive when standing at the edge of disaster. By 1914, most major explorers had already reached the South Pole. But Shackleton wanted something bigger, something history would never forget. He announced an impossible mission: to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. Nearly 2,000 miles of ice, storms, and death. People called it madness. He called it necessary. He gathered a crew, not perfect men, not elite soldiers, just ordinary people willing to gamble their lives against nature itself. Ordinary men about to enter one of the greatest survival stories ever lived. Their ship was called Endurance, a beautiful wooden vessel built to survive crushing polar ice. And in August 1914, Shackleton and his crew sailed away from civilization. Europe descended into World War I. These men disappeared into the bottom of the world. First, there was excitement, laughter, adventure, but Antarctica has a way of humbling confidence. The further south they traveled, the thicker the ice became. The sea slowly stopped moving. Then one day, Endurance stopped too, completely trapped. The ocean around them had frozen solid. and it wasn't letting go. At first, they believed the ice would eventually loosen. A few days, maybe weeks, so they waited, but the ice kept tightening, like a giant frozen hand, slowly crushing the ship. The men heard terrifying sounds at night, wood bending, beams snapping, the groan of pressure building beneath them, and still, Shackleton stayed calm. That calm mattered, because fear spreads faster than cold. Every man aboard looked to him for answers, and even when he didn't have any, he never allowed panic to lead. Days became months. The sun disappeared. Antarctic winter swallowed them whole. Darkness lasted almost all day. Temperatures collapsed far below freezing. The men slept beside frost-covered walls, knowing the ice beneath them could destroy the ship at any moment. Every morning, the pressure grew louder. The men stopped asking if the ship would survive, only when it would break. Then finally, it happened. Endurance began to die. Massive ice sheets crushed against her sides. Timbers exploded apart. Water flooded in. The ship that carried all their hopes was being slowly murdered by Antarctica. Shackleton gave the order, "Abandon ship." Imagine that moment, thousands of miles from home, no rescue coming, no land nearby, no way out, and now no ship. The men stood on endless ice, watching their world sink beneath them. Most leaders would have collapsed under that weight, but Shackleton made a decision that changed everything. He stopped talking about the expedition. From that moment forward, there was only one mission left: get every man home alive. The crew built camps directly on floating sea ice. Not solid land, floating ice. At any moment, it could crack apart beneath them. Food became precious. Warmth became rare. Hope became fragile. Still, Shackleton understood something powerful. If the mind breaks first, the body follows. So he kept routines alive. Meals, games, conversations, music, anything to stop despair from taking over. Because hopelessness is deadly in places like that. Weeks turned into months. The ice drifted wherever the currents pushed it. The men were no longer explorers. They were survivors. Then disaster struck again. The ice beneath their camp started breaking apart. The ocean opened around them. Suddenly, they were forced into tiny lifeboats, trying to survive one of the most violent seas on Earth. Massive freezing waves crashed over them. Their clothes turned to ice. Their hands went numb. Every second felt close to death. But somehow, after days of brutal sailing, they reached a small strip of land called Elephant Island. It was the first solid ground they had touched in nearly 2 years. But there was a problem. Nobody would ever find them there. They were stranded at the edge of the world. And if Shackleton did nothing, every man would eventually die. So he made one final impossible decision. Shackleton chose 5 men, Together, they would attempt one of the most dangerous boat journeys in human history. Their lifeboat was tiny, only about 22 feet long, and they planned to cross nearly 800 miles of the deadliest ocean on Earth. Think about that. Towering waves, hurricane-force winds, freezing temperatures, no modern navigation. One mistake, and they vanish forever. But staying behind guaranteed death anyway. So they launched into the Southern Ocean. The sea attacked them immediately. Waves crashed like buildings. Ice formed on the boat. Men bailed water constantly just to stay afloat. They barely slept, barely ate, barely survived. And still, Shackleton kept pushing forward. Because leadership isn't proven when everything works. It's revealed when everything falls apart. After more than 2 weeks in open ocean, they finally sighted land. South Georgia Island. But even then, the nightmare wasn't over. They landed on the wrong side of the island. No one had ever crossed its frozen mountains before, but Shackleton and 2 others attempted it anyway. No proper climbing gear, no detailed maps, no certainty they'd survive. They climbed through glaciers, slid down icy slopes, and walked for over 30 hours without rest, until finally, through the freezing wind, they heard something unbelievable. A whistle. Civilization. For the first time in almost 2 years, help was within reach. Most people would have stopped there. They survived. They escaped. The story was already legendary. But Shackleton couldn't rest. Because back on Elephant Island, his men were still waiting, still stranded, still trusting him. 3 rescue attempts failed. Ice blocked every path, but Shackleton refused to quit. Finally, on August 30th, 1916, he reached the island. As the rescue ship approached, men came running toward the shore. Thin, frozen, exhausted, but alive. Every single one of them. Not one life lost. Against impossible odds, Shackleton had brought them all home. And that's what makes this story extraordinary. He never completed the original mission. He never crossed Antarctica. Technically, the expedition failed. But history remembers him as one of the greatest leaders who ever lived. Because true leadership isn't about achieving glory for yourself. It's about carrying people through hell and refusing to abandon them there. Most people think strength is loud. That leadership means always having answers, always winning, always succeeding. But Shackleton's story teaches something different. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is simply the one who refuses to let others give up. Life has a way of trapping people in their own frozen oceans. Moments where plans collapse, dreams sink, the future disappears. Moments where survival itself becomes the mission. And when that happens, character matters more than comfort. Because anybody can lead when conditions are easy. But when everything breaks, when fear spreads, when hope feels impossible, that is when real leaders are revealed. And maybe that's the kind of victory this world needs most. The ice destroyed his ship, trapped his men. It swallowed his dream, but it never broke his resolve. This is from the power of pain, where broken stories become unbreakable strength.